Explore the harmony of health and holiness through a Catholic lens. Discover how faith rooted in tradition fosters vibrant living. This podcast rebroadcasts the weekly Becoming Gift segment on Morning Offering on Ave Maria Radio. You can check out the Physically Spiritual podcast from Awakened Catholic for my long-form discussions and presentations, or you can find my Substack at becominggift.com. This is your host, Andrew Reinhardt.
We're going through a series right now where we're focusing on kind of the big levers and for our health and holiness. Meaning, what are the areas we can focus on and put energy on that are going to make big movements in our life? And the last couple sessions, we looked at relationship, both pulling the lever, solitude and the need for prayer and connecting with ourselves, but also then pushing the lever into connection and friendship. Well, our second big lever is nourishment. We can both throttle that lever. We can pull it towards us by fasting, by not eating, or we can push it toward, of course, eating and nourishing ourselves with good food. But today I want to focus on this idea of fasting. Christ has great teachings about fasting in the gospel, but this is from Matthew chapter 6. He says, "When you fast, do not look gloomy like the hypocrites. They neglect their appearance so that they may appear to others to be fasting. Amen, I say to you, they have received their reward. But when you fast, anoint your head and wash your face, so that you may not appear to others to be fasting, except to your Father who's hidden. And your Father who sees what is hidden will repay you." The first thing to notice is when Jesus starts this passage, he doesn't say if you fast, he says when you fast, right? Meaning there was an assumption at the time that fasting was a part of life, right? And I think we've lost sight of this in our society, that we've created a situation where fasting is something extraordinary.
Yeah.
You know, we look at, for example, the lifestyle of our dear Islamic brothers and sisters and the great fast they do during Ramadan. We look at the fast that our Orthodox brothers and sisters do during Lent. And these are kind of extraordinary things that they go through. And, you know, we as Catholics, of course, have days of fasting on Ash Wednesday and Good Friday. And then we're all called to some kind of penance, some kind of abstinence on every Friday of the year, but specifically meat during Lent. But fasting is just core to human existence. You know, think of our ancestors that would have had to forage for food or hunt for food. You know, they would have gone periods of time without eating, probably. Maybe a day, maybe two. But one of our superpowers of human is, we might call it fat flux. Right? Our fat is always fluxing, meaning our body's sort of taking energy in and then pulling energy out. And if you compare us to other animals, you know, we have a great capacity to get fat, which to many people, this is, you know, much to their chagrin and to their frustration. But from a perspective of survival, it's really adaptive, actually. So when we think about this ability to hold on to energy, which is what fat is, we really run kind of like a hybrid car, where we have this kind of small bank of energy with the carbohydrates in our body, with the energy in our bloodstream, and we're able to run for a little while on that sugar. But then we also have, you know, this huge store of energy, and that's the fuel in the gas tank that kicks in when the battery runs out. And that fuel that fuel in our body is the fat in our body. And so we can switch into two different kinds of energy. Just this last year, there was a systematic review paper that was published both in the Lancet and in the British Medical Journal, where they took 99 randomized clinical trials that represented 6,500 participants, and it looked at different fasting strategies and the effects. And this review found that alternate day fasting, restricted eating, whole day fasting are as effective as traditional calorie-restricted diets for weight loss and reducing body mass. And then had a lot of other positive effects on cardiovascular health and other things. You know, so these studies are showing us that this fasting is actually healthy to some extent. Now, of course, before you start fasting, you need to talk to your doctor. You need to be prudent. You need to know yourself, your history. There's, of course, risks with fasting, whether it could be psychological if you struggle with body dysmorphia or an eating disorder, or it could be physical if there's something going on with your blood sugar or some other condition. So you have to be prudent and, of course, take the necessary steps. But there's a lot of different ways that we can implement fasting in our life. You know, some people do what's called timed eating or intermittent fasting. And you might hear things like 16-8 or 24. And what they mean by that is I'm not going to eat for 16 hours or 20 hours. Then I'm going to restrict my eating window to only 8 hours or 4 hours. There's also things like alternate day fasting, What's meant by that is it's like one day I eat, the next day I don't eat. One day I eat, the next day I don't eat. And then there's extended fasting where people are fasting for over 24 hours. A fast that I always like to attempt is to go from Holy Thursday into the Easter Vigil, right? To do that 2-day fast with our Lord in the tomb. There's also kind of fasting alternatives, different ways to mimic fasting. There's different products you can get, but you can do diets where you only eat a little bit and it sort of mimics some of the effects of fasting. So there's a lot of different ways this can be approached. But the beauty of it is our body is so wonderful and resilient. And there's so many things that happen when somebody fasts. In the first kind of 13, 12, 15 hours, what happens is people's blood sugar will regularize, their insulin will go down, and they'll sort of enter into this fasted state. Somewhere toward the end of that first state, you can start to have what's called autophagy, where cells sort of die and repair and get replaced. The body sort of like clears out the old stuff and brings in the new stuff. Toward the end of that day, there'll be stem cells stimulated in your intestines, which can cause healing in your gut and regeneration in your gut. It can help overcome insulin resistance and weight loss resistance once you go past a day of fasting. And once you're a couple days in, your body's actually starting to create endogenous antioxidants and resetting like dopamine receptors and other things. And eventually the body will even start to secrete stem cells in response to fasting. So it's just beautiful what the body does. It's not without risk though. Fasting does put your body in a little bit of a stressed state. That's why some people find when they fast, they can like pay attention because the body's a little more activated. And for some people, it can actually be too stressful, right? You have to know yourself. But when I implement fasting in my life, I actually find it helpful to kind of differentiate, right? Some days I'm going to fast for health. Other days I'm going to fast for God. And the reason for that is I think it's really two different things.
Yeah.
There's days that I'm making a sacrifice for the Lord and I'm making it prayerful and spiritual. There's other days I'm just trying to lose some weight or be healthier. And for me personally, it's helpful to sort of differentiate the two in my life.
Thanks for joining me on Physically Spiritual. If you want to support the show, you can become a patron on the Apostle app by going to physicallyspiritual.com. You can follow me on Substack at becominggift.com. I've been your host, Andrew Reinhardt. God bless everyone.